Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we are going to talk about an incredible journey, circling the earth twice by bicycle, spending 999 days cycling 38,000 miles across 6 continents. Here to talk about this journey is Jacob Lemanski. Hi, Jacob. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So I'm super interested in your journey, but before we talk about it, can you maybe talk about how you made the decision to start?
Yeah, the inspiration was just, I wanted to see how strong I could be. And it was something I had been trying to figure out for years at that point. I left on that bike ride when I was 29. And for example, each year on my birthday, I would run my age in miles. And slowly I would just push myself in these little ways. And one day I had the idea to try and bike around the world. I had this thought that only in getting to a place where I could go no further would I know that I went as far as I could. And to leave and go until I quit, then I would know how strong I could be. That was kind of the inspiration of the whole thing.
And kind of digging a bit deeper, what was pushing you to want to know how strong you are? It's a really incredible endeavor, a massive life change. Why did you want to find this out and push yourself in this way?
Fitness was just a hobby. And what do you do with that sort of hobby except to try and get better at it? And at some point, you're not going to be able to be as strong as you are when you're young. So it's just kind of that combination of things. It was just fun for me.
And you started out not knowing how long you'd ride for. You just wanted to go as long as you could. Did you have an idea how far you'd make it?
I did, but I had done a bicycle ride across the United States when I was 20, and that took 2 months. And at the end of those 2 months, I was ready to be done. I was getting lonely or bored with it or tired. And so when I left on this round the world trip, I thought maybe I'd make it 6 months at the most.
And then as it went on, when did you realize, oh, this is going to be way more than 6 months?
Well, basically, I biked around the world. I did it. I did it the first time, and I returned home, and I realized that really wasn't my goal to bike around the world. I was really trying to go until I quit. And so I left again. And that first lap around the world was 262 days. And when I left the second time, I did not expect to go another 737 days.
I can't wait to hear more about the actual trip, but I wonder, kind of going back to your childhood, have you always been into the outdoors? It comes across you're a big explorer, wanting to go explore the world. Is this something you were born with, or is this something that developed as you got older?
I grew up in rural Pennsylvania in the mountains. My family wasn't big into camping or biking, but I spent time outside, and it's really the inspiration was I wanted to feel like an explorer. I didn't do any research about the route ahead. I just wanted to arrive and discover it. Explorers used to go out and find places full of people all the time. So I wanted to be like those guys.
That's so incredible. Let's talk about the journey. You kind of mentioned there was 2 stages. Can you talk just about kind of an overview of what countries you went through, what route you did on each of these stages?
Yeah, I did that bike ride across the country when I was 20. So crossing Europe and Asia would complete my lap around the world. So I started the trip flying to Portugal, starting on the coast. And I crossed Europe into Eastern Europe, into Ukraine, across all of southern Russia, then down through Mongolia and down through China, almost to Vietnam. And then from there, I went up to Alaska, up to the Arctic Circle, and I bicycled all the way to the southern tip of South America. That was a 15-month leg. And then I flew home, I picked up my dad, and we went to New Zealand, and my dad biked with me for a month in New Zealand. And then I carried on and crossed Australia, and then finished with 100 days ride across Africa, going from Cape Town almost up to Mount Kilimanjaro.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. And when you were doing this trip, this was all self-supported, I assume camping, carrying all your gear. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what like an average day looked like and what you carried with you on your bike?
Yeah, my bike, it weighed about 120 pounds without any food and water. And depending on where I was, it might be another 50 pounds of food and water on top of that. So I would get up early. I was really just tuned to, sunrise. And as soon as the sun set, I'd get tired. As soon as it came up, I'd wake up and get going. And I would bike, maybe an hour. I'd stop for breakfast on the side of the road. I was just buying food at grocery stores and then carrying what I needed to get between grocery stores. Um, I'd bike about 50 miles a day or about 6 hours. Stopping along the way, I brought a guitar with me. So to give myself something to do, I was learning guitar while I was out there. And then, even 6 hours of biking, I had all day to do that. So bike touring, it's a lot of resting is kind of a wonderful thing about it. It's finding a pretty spot along the side of the road and staying for an hour. Um, and then in the evening, I'd have to find somewhere new to sleep each night. And my thing, I wanted to disappear into the forest or farm fields. I felt safest if no one in the whole world knew where I was. So I'd be hiding out there. And I would bring a hammock, so that allowed me to camp on hillsides and in brushy areas. And then I had a tent for places where there are no trees. But I love sleeping outside. Kind of the whole thing was just to ride my bike and sleep in beautiful places. And since I was doing that for so long, I was traveling the world.
I know I hear from listeners, and they say how they discover new places to hike or to explore or to ride. You've seen a ton of the world. Are there any parts of your journey that you think, hey, people need to know about this? It's just so stunning, or just it's a really great place to ride. Maybe it's not the most beautiful, but it's just a lot of fun. There's great villages or really great infrastructure.
Yeah, there was lots of places I'd find myself just totally baffled that I was there alone. And so all the people in the world, and somehow I have this whole beautiful landscape all to myself. Um, we were discussing just up in Canada, the section from Jasper to Banff is some of the most beautiful roads I've been on in the whole world. Um, well, honestly, it was a little tricky to find camping there, though. I ended up sleeping on a glacier one night, but otherwise, beautiful places are out there everywhere. We just gotta open our eyes, and I'm sure anywhere someone lives, they could find a good spot within miles.
You did this solo, and I'm wondering um, if you can talk, or you did most of it solo. You did part of it with your father. Can you talk a little bit about doing this solo compared to maybe doing it with somebody else, and how the trip, would have been different, better, or worse?
Yeah, I think certainly going solo is a big change from having a second person there. Um, all the responsibility is my own. I have no one to blame but myself for the situation that I'm in. Um, Also, there's no one that I need to get out of the tough situation I got them into. There's another positive side of it. But being by myself made me more approachable. If I was, two young men out there, people probably would not have walked up to us as much as I um, just had strangers approach me all the time, wondering what I was doing and checking if I needed help. If there's two people, one's got the other's back. But by myself, people were concerned for me. Um, so I think that's probably the biggest difference between traveling alone and with another in a practical sense.
Lots of people would never do a trip like this solo. What do you think it is about you? There's a little bit dream this big dream, but then also go and do it, on your own. Go for 3 years. Is this something you were just born with? This, confidence to go do these things? Is it something you learned?
Well, when I started, I didn't expect it to take that long. So I succeeded, much greater than I would have expected at the beginning. Um, but also, the goal to go as far as I can. That's such a personal place that I could only find it by myself. Um, and then practically, who would go with me? It's uh, it's a lot to ask.
In looking at, setting this goal and then achieving it, so many people fail with goals. We hear everyone's already starting to, many people are failing for their New Year's resolutions. Why do you think you're able to succeed at this, super ambitious goal? Is there something, is this just kind of your makeup that you're, when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do something, or is there something maybe that others can learn from your success?
Well, certainly persistence is something I really enjoy. So that can take someone far in life in a lot of ways. Um, but on this trip, it became strange at the end because my goal was to quit. My goal was to go until I quit. And so that could have been, I could have met somebody and stopped. I could have got injured and been forced to stop. Um, I could have got tired, but I would sleep and I'd wake up in the morning refreshed. So I wasn't sure what was going to end the trip for me. And in the end, it was just, it becomes strange. What motivates someone to go 931 days after they just went 930 days? I was using my will to continue to break my will to continue. It became a very, um, it was like a mind twist in the end.
So I think this is really interesting. When I, first heard of your trip, I thought, what an incredible physical challenge. But you talk a little bit about, or you just mentioned, physically, you'd wake up and be feeling good. And so for you to push day after day, in your case, was it more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge to keep going, or was there actually physical challenge associated with it that maybe you underplayed?
Well, I mean, I got really strong out there was a fun thing about it. And I was always flushed with endorphins from all the exercise. So honestly, day to day was really a joy to do it and to continue. Um, Honestly, I knew I was getting close to finished the first time that I woke up and I didn't want to go ride my bike that day. I was camping in Africa and I didn't break down my tent. I just stayed there for the day and I didn't go anywhere. And I knew that was a sign that I was getting close to the end. Um, because I always wanted to get up and bike. I loved it. So, yeah, I did it so much that it became too much, but the day to day, it was a joy to continue. It was easy.
Yeah, I think whenever I talk to people who haven't done a long through hike or a long bike ride, they kind of can't understand just how great you feel when you're doing this. And they think, "Oh man, you walked all day and then all you did was eat and rest and sleep and walk." But it truly is a joy. And the best holidays for me is when, when I'm flying home, I still want to go. Um, I haven't had many where I'm ready to end, but I've never gone 900 plus days like you have. Um, I want to talk a bit more about your journey. W- You've written a book about it. Are there any stories from the book that you love telling that are just, so wild about your experiences?
You know, I always think of Mongolia because it's such a far out place. People most likely will never go, and certainly they won't go wander around the Gobi Desert like I ended up doing. And there was a day out there I was biking, and the terrain's like hilly. The roads are just sandy, and um, they kind of shoot off in every direction. The people just, since there's no trees and the ground's just you can drive over it. People just they don't need roads. They just go whichever direction they need to. So, it's kind of hard to navigate out there. And I was pedaling along, and in the distance, I could see on the hill, there was something up there. And as I got closer, I realized there was a herd of camels, and they were sitting by a cistern. And I came up to them, and these 30 camels, they all stood up and looked at me. And I looked back at them, and we all looked confused. And they were hoping I could get some water out of that cistern for them, but I needed a pump. Like I wasn't able to, and I didn't have enough water to share. So I just had to leave, and they all looked around at each other, kind of disappointed. And anyway, sometimes you just run into camels out there.
On one of your YouTube videos, you talk just about the people you met throughout your journey. And, earlier in our chat, you talked about, people, being, approaching you. Can you talk just a bit about the people you met and what you learned about people on your ride?
Yeah, my strategy was I never wanted to ask for help out there. Um, if someone offered help, I would accept it. Um, but I was never approaching people in need or anything like that. So the people that came to talk to me, they were kind of self-sorting as kind people that wanted to come talk to me, as opposed to me imposing on someone that might not enjoy that or be intimidated or whatever. Um, so going through the world in this way, I was constantly just being approached by the nicest folks that wanted to help and were curious and interested, and really is everywhere in the whole world. And but especially in places that were really far out, like Mongolia, um, places where someone out on a bicycle might actually need help or need water or anything like that. Every car would stop and check if I was okay.
I'm always interested for people that have either walked or biked the world about where people are the kindest, where they, do these incredible, gifts of coming with our family or, they kind of like give you this incredible cultural experience. Was Mongolia the best for you, or were there other countries where just the local people were just, unbelievably kind, letting you, get to know them and get to know the culture?
In Mongolia, people helped me when I actually did need help, but I had this rule that I wasn't going to ask for it. So that was, they saved me a couple of times out there. But then a place like Central America, people are every single day someone would stop and give me fruit. I mean, food just grew everywhere, so they were happy to share. And and then places like in China, I was a celebrity over there. In these rural cities, there is no white guys riding their bikes around, and I would cause traffic jams because so many people would be just driving slowly to record me out their window. Or um, I would get anytime I stopped, I'd get crowds around me of people that were just curious.
That sounds incredible. What a weird experience to be like so rare.
Yeah, I it was strange. Not actually being a known person in the world. It was strange to just get so much attention. And honestly, and then compared to like coming home, I live in Denver now. I can go biking around and nobody gives me a second look, right? But having those bike bags and um, it's like a superpower. I mean, people just want to come talk to me.
Yeah, yeah. I know the feeling. Um, I find that like even a trip as short as like actually I've had some backpacking trips only like 5 days where I find I'm changed, but definitely from through hikes that are longer, I notice I change a little bit. I've never done anything longer than I think my longest was like 9 weeks. How does 3 years change you as a person of just being on your bike?
You know, what I say about it is, in that time, I became exactly who I am. I explained it, like I had no human mirrors for years. I was in countries where I couldn't speak the language, and I was alone. So there was no one to um, just tell me I was acting weird, or or you know what I mean. There's no one to compare myself to. There's no trends to get in alignment with. I was isolated, and in that isolation, I could just be exactly who I am. And over 3 years, I could lean into all of that stuff. Um, and that's kind of what the story is. It's a day by day retelling, and over those 3 years, you're gonna see me become mad in a sort of way. That was part of the fun of it. I wanted to become very far out, and I didn't know what that meant at the beginning. Um, and by the end, it I was changed. I became far out.
And when you came back to, standard Western society in Denver, did you change back? I assume you didn't change back completely, but did you change back significantly, or are you kind of still that person that was on the bike more than you were the person before you went?
Well, so I got back in 2016. So it's been 9 years now, and yeah, I'm moving back to somebody that's living in society around other people for sure. But it's been slow, and certainly I still hold on to a lot of those strange habits and that I picked up there out on the bike ride. For example, like right when I got back, I slept in my hammock in the backyard for another 8 months, like through another winter. It just didn't make sense to sleep inside in a bed when I had a hammock. Even today, I spend most of my time in the garage or like on my covered porch, doors open. That's like half inside and half outside. That's where I feel most comfortable.
Um, Most people I talk to, they kind of have a very specific goal of, I want to get to this place, or I want to complete this specific journey. Yours was different, is you just wanted to go until you quit. Like, your goal was to quit. And so what did it feel like on your last day where you're like, okay, I'm done? Was it a sense of like accomplishment, or was it a sense of, relief? It's kind of a different journey than almost everyone else who is very like number or place focused.
hmm You know, not having a destination allowed me to be very present because every day I could have quit tomorrow. Um, and that was a beautiful way of being, not really having anywhere to go. Um, but the quit, I ended up quitting. I quit twice in a way. In Africa, about 950 days in, I got to a place where I could go no further. If I could have teleported home, I would have. I was in a rough space in my head. Um, but no one was coming for me. It took me another 50 days to get home. Um, and those are hard 50 days. And then, so the second time I actually ended was the day I knew I was going to make it back from this round the world trip. I was going to survive, and it was dangerous. Um, and that was a profound moment. I'll never be able to repeat that my whole life. Um, it was a release of 3 years of tension, of constant vigilance, of being out there on the edge. And to know I made it back was just profound. It was just profound.
And when you came back, like, were your relationships with your friends and your family from before, were they different, or were you able to resume all that, like, like you hadn't been away?
Yeah, 3 years is a long time to step out of friendships and relationships, but the people I was close with were still there. Um, Maybe their children were bigger, or they were dating someone new, or even moved to a new city. But friends are friends. Um, but I was in a far out place when I got back. I moved into a buddy's house, and I got a room in his basement. And the only thing I miss while I was traveling, not a shower, not people. I miss this ant farm that I left at home. I miss it like a pet. And I had built it. It's just two panes of plastic about a centimeter apart, and stick ants in there, and they would tunnel, and I would watch them. And I got that old ant farm started. And, my background is engineering, and I hadn't designed or built anything for years. I missed it. And also I was so entirely inspired by this journey. I looked at that ant farm and I conceived to build the world's most beautiful ant farm. And just the way I took to this bike ride and took it as far as I possibly could, with my attention settled on this ant farm, I did the same thing. I ended up with this. It's 4 feet tall and 8 feet wide, as big as a sheet of plywood. It has lights in the frame which illuminate a background, which is a beautiful nebula, and then this illuminated background shines out through the tunnels. So as the ants dig, they're creating the artwork. And this art piece had a bunch of parallels to the trip. Like once you stick ants in there and start, you can't go any faster. Just like biking around the world, you just have to be patient. And it changes every day. It only exists in the moment. Same thing, just like when I was biking, I only existed in the moment. And anyways, I kind of poured myself into this very strange art piece, this living art piece. And I had just bicycled twice around the world, and then I found myself in a basement full of ants. And man, I just felt so far out.
And you've turned these ants into a business. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's my artwork. I set up a website and I now build and sell them to people. Um, Ant farms for adults, they're beautiful.
And I had one question. Do you have to feed the ants? Like what's the upkeep for an ant farm?
So I'll order ants online and I'll get 100 harvester ants, or just the big ants that you see digging all over, at least here around Denver. And they'll live in there. 14 months is my record. It starts with 100. They have maybe like a 2-month half-life. So they're dying off in there. And honestly, the whole art piece has a lifespan that starts fresh with a bunch of new tunnels. And, they'll dig maybe a 1/4 inch an hour, which it's not much to sit and watch them, but go to sleep and wake up, go to work and come home. Suddenly the whole thing's full of tunnels. But as it ages, the ants slow down. It kind of turns into a retirement home. And eventually you just have maybe 2 ants left, and you'll see they're always close to each other. They'll have 100 feet of tunnels, but they like to be close. They're social. And eventually you just have 1 ant left, and that's the only time you can identify any of the individuals. And when that one dies, after spending a year making artwork for you, you feel a little sad about your ant dying. And what a strange art piece that is.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. I know when we go to, zoos with my kids, I've always been kind of fascinated, like what they're building. And I know there's a artist that they take molten casts of ant farms, which, are really incredible. It's like a root structure, and really, really interesting to see. I mentioned earlier that you've written a book about your journey. I was wondering, are there any adventure or travel books that you love that, you can share with listeners?
When I was traveling, I read a lot of Peter Matheson. Um, 2 of his books, The Snow Leopard. He goes searching for the snow leopard up in the Himalayas. And then The Tree Where Man Was Born is about the Maasai people in Central Africa. And just, possibly where the first humans on Earth evolved. And they're just, they're kind of like beautifully written stories. They aren't high adventure. But, they inspired me in my writing as well.
Sound like great books. I've read this, In Search of the Snow Leopard. I haven't read the second one, so I'm going to add that to my list. Jacob, thanks for coming on the show today. It's been so interesting to hear about your journey.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Where can people connect with you and learn more about your trip or about your ant artwork?
Yeah, you can learn about my bike ride at howtomovethestars.com. And it has the video and podcast of my trip. I'm doing a day-by-day retelling of the story. It's going to come out twice a week. So over the next 10 years, you can join me on this twice around the world adventure.
Another incredible, goal you've set, to have a podcast uploading twice a week for 10 years. That just seems wild and I'm sure you'll do it, but it just seems wild that, 10 years from now, you'll just be finishing up your podcast.
Well, I told you I like being persistent, so
Yeah, I know.
it's helped out with this. Well, I started releasing it just a couple months ago. I've been writing it for the past 6 years, and I figure I have at least 6 years left to writing. So the 10-year time span works out for me. And then also my art, you can find my art at antlife.space.
I'll put links to those in the show notes. And thanks for everyone for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Bye-bye. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.